Okay, folks, we're in Baltimore today, and we're meeting with an organization that is actually making a difference. Throughout the United States in distressed neighborhoods, the solution to how to solve the problems are being lost, but not really. Let's talk about a group in Baltimore that's coming with a different perspective on how to transform poor community. So Will, take it on. Let them know who you are, your organization, and more importantly, why do you do what you do? I'm sure you could be doing a million other things because it takes a lot of work and commitment in order to do what you do to work with the community.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. To your listeners, to the audience, my name is Will Hanna. I'm the chairman and CEO of the New Park Heights Community Development Corporation, which are founders of the Park Heights Affordable Housing Community Land Trust and the Baltimore City Affordable Housing Community Land Trust.
Okay, could you tell me where's like specifically, is it west, east, northeast? What part of Baltimore? Because a lot of these people are from Cali, from Florida, all over the place. They don't know Baltimore like we know Baltimore.
So we're primarily based in Northwest Baltimore, which is broken up into some very different demographics. So half of the community, if you are above one of the dividing lines, is a predominantly Jewish community. And then when you have in the southern side of Park Heights, which we call the greater Park Heights community, is the mostly African-American community. It's about 90% African-American below Northern Parkway and probably about 60% Jewish above Northern Park.
So how do you, as the CDC, impact change in the community? Talk about some of the projects that you have going on in order to change the narrative. First of all, let me get folks familiar with what a CDC is. A CDC is a community development corporation that focuses on bringing about infrastructure changes, not just programs, but actually infrastructure changes. As a matter of fact, the federal government has a specific designation for community development corporation. They give out $8,000 every year. And you have to be a community development corporation. That's how serious the federal government sees the necessity of a community development corporation. So, Will, having said that, tell us about what you're doing up in Park Heights.
So our organization has been in existence since February of 1999. And over the years, we initially started out as a community organization, just had some concerned citizens that wanted to get involved in what was happening in the community. In 2006, we actually helped co-write the master plan for the community.
So people can understand what empowerment is. You did what? You helped co-write it. From a community perspective, folks, that's what community empowerment is. You're at the decision-making table and you part of the design for your program. I had to emphasize that because so many African-American communities, outsiders come in and they create the narrative.
Yes, and just to that point, the city actually hired a consultant from Boston to come in and tell us what we needed to have in Baltimore. And we were like, no, the people that need to know what we need in Baltimore, particularly in our neighborhood, was us, was the people that lived in the neighborhood, that were from the neighborhood, grew up in the neighborhood and kind of understood the needs of the community. So we've been involved in that process since about 2006, as I said. Shortly thereafter, we became a CDC in 2009, restructured our organization and became a community development corporation to fill some of the gaps that were in that aforementioned master plan. Because basically what it left us was to put it in layman's terms, left us the bones to the skeleton, but no meat on it. Mm-hmm. And so we had to kind of put the meat on it and fill the gaps and say, okay, these are what the voids are. This is where the gaps in this plan is, and make sure that what we say, as we say in our bylaws and in our structure, that we also must protect the interests of the residents of the community, which was first and foremost, and always has been for the last, since our existence, is always protecting the interests of the community. So in that, we've kind of driven several projects in the Park Heights community, particularly in Northwest Baltimore. But the biggest thing that we did was the creation of the Affordable Housing Community Land Trust. That was one of the best things that we did, that we actually got to get started on in 2010, when we also helped to write the legislation with the state.
Okay, Will, just 1 second. Keep in mind, we're talking to people that don't know what land trust is.
Gotcha.
You describe to them in all the technical terms that you're using. We know it because we're in the field, in the industry. But a lot of these folks that are listening to this is just regular people that live in poor communities, and this is trying to find a way out.
So let me reiterate that. So what we did was we had to make sure that we found a way to make sure that we, at all costs, protect the interests of the community. One of the biggest fears that communities of color have, and particularly in Black neighborhoods and urban communities across the country, one of the fears that they have is gentrification. And that is when someone else makes a plan for your community, it doesn't necessarily include you or people that look like you. Okay, that's when you know your community's been gentrified. And it's usually, you can tell when your community is going to be gentrified by the first indicator is what schools they close. That's one of the indicators, is when they start closing schools and all those other things that follow after that. What we did in the creation of the Community Land Trust, and I'll give it to you by definition, what it does is creates permanently affordable housing for, to help someone understand, if you have someone that works at McDonald's and they're able to buy a house, 10 years from now, someone that works at McDonald's will be able to buy that same house. And so the community actually has an opportunity to control the real estate in its neighborhood, what those prices are sold at, what it's sold for. And the way that that's done is there's something that's called the average median income. So basically that says what the people in this community, this is the average salaries or average household income in this neighborhood. So in the neighborhood that we work in, the average median income or average household income is about $30,000 per household.
1 second, because people might think 30,000 is a lot.
Yeah,
it isn't. Go ahead.
Right. And so what happens is, let me give someone a real world. I'm giving you a real world example. If someone makes $30,000 and they're paying $1,200 a month in rent, they're barely making rent, because $1,200 a month is, we know what that is a year. That's a third of their income, just paying rent. And a lot of people are in those situations. So what we did is we had to find a way that people could become a homeowner and be able to afford it. So what we've noticed is that in some of our neighborhoods, and people will see this all the time across the country, they'll see where someone will actually buy a house. 5 years ago, they could have bought that same house for $130,000, $140,000. And then when the community is being gentrified is when you see that price go to $350,000. And so if the median income is $30,000, someone that buying a house for $350,000 is not going to happen for them. So the question always becomes, who are you building these homes for?
Excellent.
Where we took a whole different approach and said that, why can't we maintain, especially when we know, and it's in a lot of urban communities, a lot of our communities, a lot of Black and brown communities, where we know that the income is low, and that roughly 60 to 70% of the community pays rent and doesn't own. How do we fix that? And that's where we came with the idea and said, you know what? We're going to take the example that we did in Roxbury, Massachusetts. It was the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative.
I'm
Said,
familiar
you know
with
what?
that.
Yes.
In fact, I visit that location. I visit so many best practices.
Yes.
Newtown Community, that's another place that's
Yes.
doing a lot of work in Newark, New Jersey. So you're right. When you go and you look at best practices, then you bring it home and you make it work.
Well, one of the reasons that we started there was because in my previous life, I was a former legal analyst with the U.S. Department of Justice, and I did federal oversight.
That does bring the skill set that you had to the table that increase the likelihood of your organization being successful. However, a lot of nonprofits, especially in poor communities, the individual that's leading it doesn't have the skill sets necessary to understand the process. So that's why it's so critical that people like you step up to the table and make it happen. Now, if you don't know about Baltimore, let me give an example in Tampa so you can understand the seriousness in Baltimore. Well, in West Tampa, a crime is committed every 15 hours. In Baltimore, a crime is committed every 15 minutes. So you understand the different obstacles that this gentleman is trying to put together in order to make it work. I call it a best practice. It's a best practice because you look at the worst of the neighborhoods and begin to empower the community to find its way out to success. So I definitely commend you in that particular respect. And I'm happy to be one of the newest board members to the organization because I think that like minds, when you bring it together, you create changes. Now, I'm from Baltimore. I'm out of Sandtown. And as you know, back there in 1990, Sandtown was the jewel of the next best thing.
Right.
The Kirk administration and Mr. Rouse created this thing called community building and partnership. Out of that particular strategy, they brought people from around the country. And I'm talking about Germany, Sweden, Yale, Princeton, all the Ivy League institutions in order to teach us how to do stuff. When in fact, it wasn't teaching us how to do stuff, they was doing it. And the one thing liked about me, I was getting it in. I said, nah, I want to learn how to do this. And as a result of that, when I left there, I came to Tampa. And I applied the best practices from that strategy right there to show that it could work if you tweak a couple of things, that you could create an empowered community. Just like you're doing right there. A lot of people don't understand the notion of community comprehensive initiative comes out of Baltimore. And I think what's going on in Park Heights, you better get ready. It's going to be a different approach, a bottom-up approach that looks at how do you create real infrastructure changes, like the land trust, and for example, but all those different key components to change the neighborhood. And in Westwood, they say, and this is what a person taught me, if you got good leadership, like yourself, if you got a good plan, like y'all created, and then if you got partners like nonprofit, government, financial institutions, that's what makes it work. And guess what? You don't have to have the money. That's what brings the money. People fail to realize that you don't have to have money, but if you create the story, if you create the narrative, the money will come.
Absolutely.
So
and if I could add to that, one of the things that was so empowering about what we did, and like I said, we've done either we've done or assisted in the development of about 75 houses so far.
Say it again.
About 75 houses so far.
Y'all say it again.
Done about 75 houses over the last few years.
Do you know how many families there is? If you multiply 75 times 3 or 4, look at the number of people that have a house. And folks,
exactly.
When you're in a city like Baltimore or Tampa, and you see the community being developed, but you know it's not being developed for you.
That's right.
Because you're about to be gentrified by all these pretty buildings. That's what this organization does. It makes sure that they equal the playing field so you can stay. Again, I commend you on the work that you do as a community development corporation. The one thing I want to bring to the table is to talk about the different avenues of bringing money to the CDC. For example, are you familiar with the controller of the currency?
The control of the currency?
Right.
Mm.
These people control the money, okay? That's how you get money into the community. And then are you familiar with community development financial institutions?
CDFIs, absolutely.
Yes, that's another pot of money. So how do we strategize our stuff so we can bring all that money into Park Heights? Because here's the thing, folks. You're not going to make it with this grants. You have to finesse the deal with understanding lenders and investors and developers. It's called public-private partnership that bring about the change. So watch out for Park Heights. Anything you want to say before we go? And I know a board meeting is the 10th, is that correct?
It's the 10th, yes.
I'll be there. Anything you want to say, anybody that's, especially folks that's looking at this, and they're saying to themselves, how do you get started? I mean, what do we do? More importantly, how do we harness the leadership to even want to be a part of it? So what would your suggestion be? How would you address that issue?
This all starts with out of passion and fulfilling the need. And if you have those two things, because we never started out being driven by money. We started out by being driven by fulfilling a need. And one of the things that we did was we saw that we had a 40% unemployment rate in our community. We had 60% of people that were renting. And we said, okay, if we're doing all of these houses, well, guess who's doing the work now? The people that were in the community, the guys that were standing outside on the corner, the guys that were doing it. So we got all of the contractors that did the work were all from the neighborhood, the welders.
For a second, because I can't overemphasize this. This is what community development corporations do. They change the infrastructure world. I just need people to understand the nature of a community development corporation. It's not a neighborhood group.
Right.
It's not a community group. It's in fact a group that brings about economic and community development. So we'll continue because it's fantastic. And I love what y'all doing, man. But I want people to understand the structure that you need in order to do it.
Yeah, everything that we do is not just, I mean, the real estate is good, but it does us no good, especially our neighborhoods, to build a bunch of nice, shiny buildings and don't help the people. So, so we have to kind of do it all at once. So we have to partner our real estate development with human development. And so we're doing all of these things at the same time. The way that we started, though, was just out of a group of people that just had some passion to want their neighborhood to be better. And so we said, how do we do that? How do we structure? I was fortunate enough to bring some legal expertise to it, to the equation where I was the youngest person in the room at the time. And everyone was seniors, and a lot of communities see that, where they see a lot of the senior women that are involved in the community development aspect or in the neighborhood associations and things like that. But we had to understand that we had to make people understand the business of developing our communities. Excellent. And there's a business side to that. And so, it took years of education, years of educating people and informing the residents that, hey, what's going on here is not in your best interest. This is why it's not, and this is what needs to happen. And so it took us years to do it, but we're finally making that headway. We're getting it done. And we're excited that we have a new group of board members that are excited, that are thrilled, such as yourself.
Well, let me jump in there and say, we're talking about a dream team, folks. We're talking about a group of people that's coming from different expertise. Right. And when they combine all this expertise into one, that world didn't select people because they liked you. He selected you because you had a skill set that added to the other skill set that actually bring about creating community change. So all I can say, Park Heights, y'all better get ready because it's gonna be something different. But even more, you're gonna be able to see the tangible changes in your neighborhood. And you're gonna feel that sense of empowerment by knowing that the new Park Heights CDC got your back. So
That's right.
I'm looking forward to getting on board and, man, to change the narrative. So thanks a lot. And I'll see you then Monday. No.
Actually, we changed this week's meeting to Thursday. So this week will be Thursday.
Oh, so it's gonna be Thursday. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I want to definitely, whatever I have planned, I'm kicking that out and you become the party. So no, thanks a lot, man. Let me stop the recording.
Indeed.